The Last Word with Catherine Rampell in for Lauren starts right now. Hey, Catherine.
Hey, Jen. We have a good show coming up tonight. I'm very excited. We're going to talk tariffs. I'm the only person at this network who loves talking tariffs as much as Lawrence does.
Steph
so I feel like
I would say you guys could have a tariff party or a tariff duel or something.
I'm really making this show sound very sexy tonight, aren't I? We also have some other fun guests coming on, including the veteran who is going to challenge Mike Lawler for a very flippable seat in Westchester.
Kate Conley. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. Kate Conley. I'm very excited to talk with her. And we have some other great guests coming up. So don't be deterred, audience, by the talk of tariffs.
I won't.
We'll make that fun, too.
Chris Coons knows a whole lot about national security and this war. You got a great show. I'll look forward to watching.
Yes. Thanks so much, Jen. Breaking news tonight. On day 145, Donald Trump appears to have a new way to stop the rising death toll in his wildly unpopular and illegal war in Iran. The solution? Just rig the data. The New York Times reports tonight. On Wednesday, the Pentagon reported on its casualties website that a total of 18 American service members had been killed during the war in Iran. By Thursday, the Defense Department had lowered that number, reporting that 14 American troops had been killed in the war. 3 military officials said that one reason behind the change was that the Trump administration decided to remove 4 service members killed this past weekend from the list, 3 in Jordan and 1 in northern Iraq, because their deaths occurred after President Trump declared a ceasefire in the war in April. The officials described sensitive internal discussions on the condition of anonymity. So we're in a ceasefire. That's today's version of the story from the Trump administration. Do leaders in ceasefires sound like this? I am considering a massive attack, bigger than ever before. I am close to making a decision. We are all set for it, adding that Iran wants to negotiate, but that they haven't received enough pain yet. To be clear, in case it wasn't obvious, that was Donald Trump in a brief interview with Axios today. A massive attack. He might do a massive attack, but we're in a ceasefire, or so I'm told, at least as far as the casualty numbers go. Either way, it doesn't seem like Iran is too worried about Trump's threat. According to that same Axios report, 2 regional sources with knowledge of mediation efforts said Iranian leadership hasn't accepted the latest proposal put forward. Secretary of State Marco Rubio backed up Trump today while on a trip to the Philippines. Listen.
Iran is begging us, okay, both directly and indirectly. Let's do a deal. Let's talk. Let's talk. Iran is begging every day. The problem with Iran is every time they make a deal, the people that are in charge there, they either break it or they want to change it. So it looks like they're not ready to make a deal. So they're going to continue to pay a price. You know, guys, I saw Arachi, their foreign minister, who the other day say or something about their policies, an eye for an eye. The president's policy is a head for an eye. I mean, honestly, that's what it's going to be. I mean, they will pay a very heavy price.
In the House, Democrats forced Republicans to go on the record about whether they want more of Trump's war with Iran, just over 100 days from Election Day. The MS Now Capitol Hill team reports on Thursday, the House adopted a war powers resolution directing the U.S. to cease hostilities with Iran as Washington's war with Tehran reaches the 145-day mark. The measure cleared 214 to 208, with 4 Republicans joining all Democrats in support. Just 2 hours after the House adopted the resolution, the Senate failed to advance its own war powers measure. In a 47 to 49 vote, senators failed to discharge an Iran war powers resolution, with only 1 Republican, Senator Susan Collins of Maine, joining Democrats in support. Never missing out on an opportunity to add a little confusion to his Middle East policy, Donald Trump delivered this surprise on social media today, putting a new condition on the nuclear agreement the U.S. signed with Saudi Arabia just yesterday. The Washington Post reports the nuclear deal, which was fiercely opposed by Israel and others concerned about nuclear proliferation, is totally subject to Saudi Arabia joining the Abraham Accords, Trump said in a social media post, referring to the effort from his first term to normalize relations between Israel and Muslim-majority countries from which it has long been estranged. The Saudis have thus far refused to join the accord. The deal to allow the Saudis to build nuclear power plants using U.S. technology, creating a pathway to a Saudi nuclear enrichment program, has set off debate in Congress. Many lawmakers fear that allowing more countries to develop enrichment programs could eventually lead to more possessing nuclear weapons. Even Donald Trump's friends over at Fox seemed a little confused by the agreement.
I worry about some people that want to bring Saudi Arabia back. President Trump's out of office 4 or 5 years later. There's a new guy in charge, and he agrees more like the Wahhabism and the bin Laden that they got rid of. I love the progress Saudi Arabia's made, but I don't see our benefit to letting them enrich. I think it's a bad trend.
So on day 145 of this war with Iran, Trump still has no exit plan. The Atlantic reports the Trump administration is back at war. It just doesn't want to admit it. The Pentagon, whose leadership stepped in front of the cameras in the weeks following the start of the war in late February, hasn't held a press briefing since May to answer even basic questions. Why is a resumption of the war necessary? What are the strategic objectives, and how have they changed? How many casualties have American forces suffered? What would define success? Even some of Trump's closest allies privately acknowledged that he is in a bind. His choice: escalate the conflict and risk losing more American soldiers and depleting stockpiles of munitions while hurting Republicans' election chances this fall, or walk away now to cut his political losses while leaving Iran in a stronger strategic position than it has held in decades. That sounds like an awfully precarious scenario for the United States, the Middle East, the rest of the world, but according to Donald Trump, everything's going just fine.
We're doing very well against the Islamic Republic of Iran. We're doing extremely well. The Iran war, we're doing very well, very, very well. I would say better than anybody expected could be done.
Better than anyone expected could be done. Leading off our discussion tonight is Democratic Senator Chris Coons of Delaware. He is a member of Appropriations, Foreign Relations, and Judiciary Committees. Senator, earlier I mentioned that New York Times reporting that the Defense Department is changing the death toll numbers from this war to exclude 4 fallen service members from the official count because their deaths occurred during the ceasefire. What message do you think that sends to the families of these service members? I think you are muted, Senator.
My apologies.
No problem. I thought it was on my end at first, but apparently not.
I think this continues the disrespect shown to hundreds of American service members who've been injured in the line of duty and not adequately reported. And as someone who was at Dover Air Force Base yesterday with President Trump, with Secretary Hegseth, with other senators and House members and senior generals, the Chief of Staff of the Army, it seemed perfectly clear to me during that somber military ceremony where 4 families received the remains of their fallen loved ones that they did not die during a ceasefire, that they died as a direct result of an attack by Iran on our allies in the region, and that they should be recognized and honored as having fallen in service to our nation during a war. So, look, the picayune matter of exactly what column of numbers their deaths belong in is far less important than the fact that we honor their death and their service. And frankly, what the American people and our service members are owed by Secretary Hegseth and President Trump is a clear strategy, a plan for how to end this war in a way that reopens the Strait of Hormuz, that weakens Iran, and that stabilizes the region. That's something they have failed to deliver in 145 days and at an enormous cost.
So what is your understanding of where things stand right now? And you mentioned that the Pentagon owes us some semblance of a strategy. To the extent that they've offered anything, what is your understanding of what the strategy is?
So President Trump keeps threatening to bomb more broadly, to unleash more on the Islamic Republic of Iran. And let me start by being clear about one thing that we all agree on. The Iranian regime has oppressed their own people, has supported terrorism throughout the region, has played a role in killing thousands of troops. These are not good guys. The mullahs and ayatollahs have led a dangerous terrorist regime. But throwing more bombs at them isn't going to produce a positive result. And part of President Trump's failed leadership in this instance has been how many different goals he has laid out. Remember, help is on the way. We're going to come help the Iranian people overthrow the regime, was something he was talking about early on when this war began. You don't hear much about that now. We're going to stop Iran's support for proxies, their ability to sustain Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis. Well, the Houthis just closed another key strait in the region, the entrance to the Red Sea. So not much success there. What Secretary Hegseth has focused on is a few narrow goals. Sink their conventional navy. Yes, accomplished. Bomb a whole lot of their ballistic missile launchers. Yes, accomplished. Create a whole lot of holes in the ground. Sure, fine. But Iran's ability to use the huge number of cheap, lethal drones that they have and they manufacture quickly, that hasn't been contested. And all of this, frankly, is because he and President Trump have dragged their feet on embracing Ukraine, the one country in the world that has shown they are masters of detecting and intercepting Iranian Shahed drones. Now, our allies in the Gulf are doing that, the Emiratis, the Saudis, the Kuwaitis. But for us to not be doing that now, urgently, in order to strengthen the defenses of our bases, our homeland, and our allies, shows just a profound lack of strategic vision. There are some leaders within the military and intelligence community who've been pressing this forward and who've been urging this, but President Trump has not so far taken that key step, which would be the beginning of a strategy of getting us out of this mess.
Well, that brings me to my next question, which is, what would be considered an acceptable resolution in Iran at this point? What are Democrats asking for? Because presumably it's not another forever war. What is
Correct.
the best possible resolution we could get at this point?
Rule number one about holes: when you're in a hole, stop digging. Right now, what we are failing to do is to help Ukraine win their war against Russian aggression. And we seem to be just extending and continuing the war with Iran. One of the other key failings that President Trump had in planning for and executing this war was including our allies. Whatever you think of President George W. Bush, before he went to war in the Middle East, he at least made the case to the American people, to Congress, and included all of our allies. Look, I'm not a big guy. If I were to ever go into a bar fight, I'd make sure that I had my bigger friends or my partners, cousins, neighbors, brothers going in with me. That's what we've done in almost every previous conflict. We won the Second World War in no small part because of how many great allies we had. Instead of berating our allies, President Trump and Secretary Hegseth should be working with them to get them engaged in reopening the Strait of Hormuz and securing the Strait of Hormuz. So partner with Ukraine, partner with NATO, partner with regional allies, set a clear timeline and goals, use the pressure of a blockade to put more pressure on Iran, get more sanctions applied to Russia and to China for their support of Iran, and negotiate until you're back to what Obama had, which was inspectors on the ground to make sure their nuclear program is over. All of this, I think, would be progress. Almost none of this is on their current menu. What's happening is more bluster, more bombs, and more threats, not more defense for American bases, not a clear path towards reopening the strait.
Senator Chris Coons, thanks for your time tonight. I hope you don't have any bar fights planned in your immediate future.
Thank you.
Coming up, after a career of riding his father's coattails, Donald Trump Jr. has found a brazen new way to cash in on his father's return to the White House. The reporter who broke that story will join us after the break. And later, in their quest to retake the House, Democrats have their eyes on flipping the seat of a very vulnerable New York Republican in a key House race this November. We'll talk to the Democrat taking him on. Stay with us. For Donald Trump, corruption, grift, they're really kind of a family business these days, one that his eldest son is now cashing in on. The New York Times is looking at Donald Trump Jr., who prior to his father's presidency, didn't exactly show signs of being a financial genius. In fact, his resume prior to his dad becoming president was mostly being employed by his dad at his dad's company and being a boardroom judge on his dad's reality show. But look at the New York Times headline now. Donald Trump Jr.'s investment firm posts staggering returns of 200%. The fledgling firm, run by the president's oldest son and his partner, Omid Malik, has made investments in AI and defense technology that have tripled in value in just months. The Times notes nothing in their report was blatantly illegal, but describes how one of these staggering investments worked in the case of Polymarket. The government had banned it from taking monetary wagers from U.S. residents, but last year, a federal regulator in Dad's administration granted it an operating license in the United States, worth $300 million when 1789, Don Jr.'s company, invested. The platform is now valued at $15 billion. So that's just one example, but there's kind of a theme here. The Times reports that what sets apart the latest moves by Donald Trump Jr. is how he and his partner, Mr. Malik, through 1789 Capital, are cashing in on the policies of the current administration openly and without apology. Many of the companies that 1789 has invested in have large government contracts, while others, like Polymarket, have benefited directly from new Trump policies or rollbacks of existing laws. Here now to tell us more is the reporter on that same story, New York Times finance reporter Maureen Farrell. She covers private equity firms, hedge funds, and billionaires, and their influence on the investing world and society at large. So, Maureen, 1789 Capital was founded in 2022. In 2024, Trump's son joins, Dad wins the presidency, and now there are 200% returns. You cover Wall Street. How typical is a return like that?
Very atypical.
Okay.
You rarely see anything like that. And just to put it in comparison, the average fund, and it's been a good run for these funds, is up about 20% by comparison. So 200% is jaw-dropping by any imaginable measure.
What's his secret?
They've been winning kind of across the board in so many of their investments, whether it's SpaceX, defense contractors, other AI companies. They're really posting wins after wins after wins. Some have gone public, like SpaceX, another company, Cerebras. As we said, some companies have received government contracts. That's helped their valuation go up a lot. Favorable government business. The wind has been at their back, let's just say.
Okay. That sounds a little bit like a euphemism, but who knows? Is there any evidence that you were able to find to suggest that Don Jr. was improperly influencing government policy or government contracts, or alternatively had some early insight into how those policies would evolve?
No, there was no evidence of that. And I mean, he told us, and he told me in interviews, he talks to his father every few weeks, never discusses business, but I did not find any evidence of that, of them like influencing. I think the question is, I mean, there's this sheen around the company. I mean, there's a lot of people that did tell us that, you know, it was whether giving money to 1789, which has obviously been incredibly lucrative for their investors, or working with them, you know, there's this sign that to the world that you're part of the inner circle. So there are a lot of reasons, but their track record is, you know, very quickly, really some of the best we've seen.
Yeah.
In business.
So they're making money for themselves. They're making money for their investors. Talk to me more about this additional benefit that comes from investing in 1789. You talked about it as sending a signal to the world that you're part of the inner circle. What does that mean in tangible terms?
It's unclear. You know, it's a little bit murky, but it seemed, I mean, they had $100 million under management. Very quickly, they got to $3 billion. They went out to their world, and people very quickly put money in. I talked to people in the industry, and to put it in context, to raise $3 billion as a first-time fund manager, neither Don Jr. nor his partner Omid Malik had been fund managers. Like Omid Malik had worked on Wall Street, but they said they've never seen that before, that that you could raise $3 billion that quickly. So a lot of people were very keen to give money to this fund.
Well, because they have such a great investment record, or the new
Now they
investment.
do,
Now they
yes.
do. Now they do. I understand that you've also reported on Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, whose firm also received $2 billion from Saudi Arabia's sovereign wealth fund, I believe, after Trump's first term. And you write in your new piece, Jared Kushner, who had been involved in early peace negotiations with Iran while his private investment firm was seeking to raise funds from U.S. allies in the Middle East. His firm later said it would not seek additional money from allies while Mr. Kushner was volunteering for the administration. He's volunteering for the administration. He's not an official government employee. I think the real question that a lot of Americans might have for someone in this position is, what are his conflicts of interest here? Because I presume he doesn't have to make the same kinds of disclosures that a regular government employee would have to make.
That's a very fair point. He doesn't. So it's very murky. It's very opaque. I mean, we know some of his investments. Jared Kushner's investments are largely outside of the United States. So he's taking money from the Middle East. He's obviously working on peace deals, even though he's not currently fundraising. And he's investing all over the world, with our allies. But we don't see, and that's a difference, I will say, between Jared Kushner's firm and something that, Don Jr.'s team at the 1789 team, we know they say they've never been government employees. They're totally outside of government. I mean, he's obviously the president's son, but Jared Kushner has worked in government. He is volunteering. They invest only in the United States and private companies. Jared Kushner's global. But there is a clear, and I think that's why there was when we first reported the story that he was out actively fundraising, there was a lot of shock. We heard a lot. And then quickly thereafter, he said, no, I'm not doing it. I'm going to pause fundraising. But he is still investing.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's not like he's divested from any of this, right?
No, he's still very actively working on his firm.
Yeah. Maureen, thanks so much for your time tonight. This is a great article. I really encourage everyone out there to read it. Coming up next, one of the most competitive races in November runs through New York's Hudson Valley, where Republican Mike Lawler has faced boos from angry town hall crowds for his support of Trump's agenda. Now he faces a West Point veteran with years of military service who is looking to take his seat in Congress. Democratic House candidate Kate Conley joins us next. With just 103 days left until the midterm elections, a new Emerson College poll finds that Democrats have a double-digit 11-point advantage on the generic congressional ballot, leading Republicans 53% to 42%. And one of the places Democrats hope those numbers will lead to a flipped seat is New York's 17th congressional district. The Hudson Valley seat is one of the most competitive House races this year and one of a handful of contests that could determine which party controls Congress. Democrats are betting that Army veteran and former National Security Council official Kate Conley can unseat Republican Congressman Mike Lawler, who Donald Trump has repeatedly endorsed. And given the reception that Lawler's been getting from his own constituents, this should be a race to watch.
Michael Lawler to come to the stage.
Joining us now to discuss is Kate Conley. She is the Democratic candidate for New York's 17th congressional district. Kate, tell our audience why you believe you have a real opportunity to flip the 17th district.
Catherine, thanks so much for having me. And I mean, look, we just saw how folks here in the Hudson Valley are feeling. That the last 4 years with Mike Lawler representing this district has resulted in only additional hardship. And that's hardship that's been felt by families across the political spectrum. Working class people who are doing everything they can to get by, but they see a system that's rigged against them and driven by corruption and dysfunction that we're seeing coming out of Washington, D.C., because you have people like Mike Lawler, a political operative who has already used the system to benefit himself, funneling hundreds of thousands of dollars to his own consulting firm over the years, who are putting himself ahead of the people he's there to represent. And so that reality check is coming this November.
One issue that is of high importance to the 17th district is the so-called SALT deduction, the state and local tax deduction, which Republicans capped during the first Trump administration. Removing that cap is popular in lots of high-tax blue districts like yours, but doing so would be expensive, and the deduction tends to be somewhat regressive since rich people are more likely to itemize on their taxes. What is your approach to this issue?
So I think it's important to recognize where the SALT tax cap has actually come from, which was a 2017 Trump tax bill to punish blue states like New York and California. For 104 years since the establishment of the federal income tax, there was never a cap on state and local tax deductions until Donald Trump in 2017. And so when you're looking at what this actually means for people here, yeah, it was hard. It was a tax for middle class New Yorkers and still is. The $10,000 cap, that temporary raise to $40,000 expires in 5 years. But if you look at what the original bill said, the law that was passed, that tax cap was set to expire in its entirety at the end of 2025. But instead of letting that happen, Mike Lawler voted to make the SALT tax cap permanent for New Yorkers. And this temporary lift of $10K to $40K goes away in 5 years when he's off running for his next political office. And so I think this is a really important indication of just who Mike Lawler is. He'll sit there and mislead voters, put up a smokescreen of lies. But I'm telling you, that smokescreen is clearing and people are seeing the actual damage that's been done. And that's what this November is going to be about, holding him accountable for the facts, not the fiction he's spewing.
Again, data from the Tax Policy Center and others do suggest that repealing the cap entirely would give more benefits to higher income people, but you were right that there are middle income people who would benefit as well. On a different note, Lawler has claimed that you are unwilling to debate him while your campaign says you are willing. So what is the holdup? Can you commit to a specific number of debates and a timeline?
What cracks me up here is Mike Lawler spent the last 6 months and over $1.5 million doing everything possible to not face me. And so it's awesome that he's this excited to spend some quality time together. And I know our forums start next month, and we're already in negotiations with lining up debates, which are coming, because I cannot wait to hold him publicly accountable for the harm that he has done to our community. And so can't wait to take him on. And we know what's coming from him. Misrepresentations and lies, because when you look at the difference between us, the options for voters couldn't be more clear. For the last 20 years, while Mike Lawler has been a political operative looking to benefit from American democracy, I was out there leading America's sons and daughters in defense of it. And here in New York 17, that difference is going to matter a lot to voters, especially at a time where trust with the government and the corruption and dysfunction we're seeing couldn't be higher.
Well, I look forward to seeing those debates. Kate Conley, thanks so much for your time tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Coming up next, Donald Trump is reigniting his tariff war with Canada. But so much for Canada Nice. Our gentle neighbors to the north have had it and look ready to fight back. And later, if you thought the GOP would stop after overturning Roe v. Wade, enter Texas Republicans, who have a plan to go much, much further in their attack on reproductive rights by banning IVF. Stay with us. It takes a certain talent to make Canada, one of America's closest allies, biggest trading partners, and historically friendliest neighbors, to start questioning whether it even wants American products anymore. But that is exactly what Donald Trump has somehow managed to do with his tariff war against our neighbor to the north. This week, Trump threatened to impose new 50% tariffs on most Canadian goods, including wine and hockey sticks, starting on August 19th. Politico reports, quote, Canadian officials are warning that the new levies threaten to further tarnish the already damaged American brand and further harm economies in swing states like Maine and Michigan that have deep economic ties with Canada. Quote, I think we're getting into an ugly phase. said Canadian Senator Peter Boehm. If there are concessions about getting U.S. alcohol back on the shelves, there's no guarantee that the consumer is going to go out and buy them. But Trump isn't just punishing Canada. Today, he announced a new wave of 10% to 12.5% tariffs targeting 60 trading partners, set to take effect at 12:01 a.m. It's Trump's latest effort to rebuild his disastrous trade agenda after the Supreme Court ruled that his tariffs were illegal and unconstitutional back in February. And while Trump may love it, voters have pretty much had it with the Trump economy. The tariffs, along with Trump's war, are making everyday staples way more expensive, increasing fears of higher inflation and creating a lot of anxiety over the cost of living. Just as an example, 30-year mortgage rates have climbed to their highest level in nearly a year. Global oil prices surged past $100 a barrel today, driven, of course, by Trump's war in Iran. And according to AAA, the national average for gas rose another 3 cents today to $4.09 a gallon, compared to $2.89 before Trump's war. Politico reports a source close to the White House warned that new tariffs could hurt Republican midterm chances, saying, quote, "Everything that you do that's not focused on affordability is not helpful. When you announce new tariffs, it's not like, okay, well, let's see what they do. It's, oh crap, those are the bad things." Joining us now to discuss those bad things is Jared Bernstein, former chair of the White House Council of Economic Advisors in the Biden administration. Jared, it's great to see you. One question I have for you about all of this is whether Donald Trump has exposed a bigger problem, that Congress has given the president too much authority over tariffs.
Unquestionably, that's the case, and everyone should be very surprised that Congress, including Republicans, who, as you just suggested, are the ones who are really at political risk in the midterms, of course, Trump's not running, are looking at some very tough races, precisely because the measures that you described, the numbers you just took us through. By the way, I thought it was great that you cited the 30-year fixed rate mortgage, 6.85%. That's through the roof, as it were, through the roof on the unaffordable house, if I may.
No pun intended,
people are, as you say, people have had it. I think the president's really opened a three-front trade war here, Catherine. One front against the Supreme Court, who consistently knocks down his trade policy. It's a pretty sympathetic Supreme Court, but not when it comes to these issues. Another front against the American consumer, and that's just exactly the wrong thing to do in this affordability crisis era. And then a third front on our trading partners, including Canada. So it's a mess.
So let me ask that question a slightly different way, which is, if Democrats win back the House and the Senate, should they make it a priority to reclaim tariff authority, regardless of who is in the White House in the future? So in a way that hems in a president, not just this president, but perhaps a Democratic president going forward.
Totally, I think they should, and I think those powers were given to Congress for a reason, in part to avoid the prospect of a president who had no understanding of international trade, but just had a very wrong-headed view about who's exploiting us and so on, something that Donald Trump's been struggling with for decades. I'd probably grab the war powers back first, because that just seems more existential and more consequential. But the fact that Congress just essentially has rolled over and let presidents, as you say, of both parties implement these, essentially shape international trade in their issue versus the kinds of more deliberative approaches to this critical part of global economics is, we've seen what a misfortune that is. And consumers particularly are seeing how expensive it is, especially under this regime.
Trump says his tariffs are working. They're a negotiating tool. How would you evaluate that claim?
False, deeply false. And, look, at some level, it doesn't matter that much how I evaluate the claim. I mean, myself and my fellow economists have done some very solid research. We've shown that 90% of the tariffs are being passed through to businesses and consumers. There's new solid paper from one of the Federal Reserve banks showing that half of the firms are telling us they're still passing through tariff costs. So they're not done with this. It's continuing to pressure inflation. Inflation would be almost a point lower were it not for these tariffs. So that's what we've done. But what really matters here is the experience of the American people. They're essentially telling anyone who will listen to them, politician, media, whomever, that their biggest constraint right now is affordability. It is the cost of living. And between the war in Iran and the tariffs, this president and his administration are not just pushing in the wrong way on affordability, they're pushing really hard. I mean, you just showed that the gas price was below $3 a gallon pre-war. It's now getting close to $4.10 a gallon. The mortgage rate was just below 6%. It's now 6.85%. By the way, I did the calculation before coming on tonight. That adds another $2,300 a year to your mortgage payment. Okay, so this is anti-affordability policy, and I think that's what really matters. Eggheads like me can crunch the numbers all day, and I think we should. But people get which way is up when it comes to prices.
Yeah, I do remember talking with you pretty frequently when gas prices were painfully high during the Biden administration. And we talked all the time about how it would be great if there were a dial under the Resolute desk that would allow the president to turn down gas prices. But it feels like there may be a dial on the Resolute desk that allows the president to turn up prices in this administration.
I wanted to, you and I used to talk about this a lot, and the truth is that presidents typically get blamed for gas prices, and more often than not, their fingerprints aren't really on them. This is a rare exception. I mean, you can convincingly and straightforwardly connect this increase in gas prices to decisions made by this president. So in this case, yes, there's a dial. And not only does Trump refuse to turn it, but he's turning it, again, pretty hard the wrong way.
Yeah. Jared Bernstein, thanks so much for your time tonight.
Thank you.
Coming up, voters in Texas largely oppose banning IVF. But of course, Texas Republicans, politicians anyway, are not listening to their voters, because that's exactly what they were trying to do, ban IVF. That's up next. You're going to want to hear this. Do you remember those warnings that Republicans wouldn't stop at overturning Roe v. Wade? Well, that wasn't hyperbole. The GOP got greedy and is now trying to ban IVF, at least in Texas. The Austin Chronicle reports that Texas Republicans have adopted a new party platform calling on lawmakers to, quote, protect fetal life from destructive practices such as IVF and commercial surrogacy, end quote, during next year's legislative session. Dr. Kaylin Silverberg, an IVF provider at the Texas Fertility Center, defended the practice to the Austin Chronicle, saying, quote, nature discards 85% of embryos, so if anything, IVF is a procedure that reduces embryo destruction compared to nature, but you can't prosecute nature. Here's Donald Trump pandering on IVF, as he did on every issue, when he was campaigning in 2024.
Under the Trump administration, your government will pay for, or your insurance company will be mandated to pay for, all costs associated with IVF treatment, fertilization for women. IVF treatment. Because we want more babies, to put it very nicely.
A little bit of a cognitive dissonance there. Joining us now to discuss is Michelle Goodwin, constitutional law and global health professor at Georgetown Law School. She is the author of Policing the Womb, Invisible Women and the Criminalization of Motherhood. Professor Goodwin, if restrictions like the one that is being contemplated in Texas were to go into effect, who would be affected?
Well, this would be, this would be LGBTQ couples. This would be individuals who are heterosexual couples but happen to be infertile. About 20 to 30% of pregnancies will end in miscarriage or stillbirth. And so there are couples that have very fragile reproductive health, and they would like to be able to create families, or they're gay individuals who would like to be able to create families, and IVF has been very helpful for those couples to be able to do so. There are couples that have experienced multiple miscarriages, which can be incredibly fraught emotionally and psychologically. And so they seek IVF as an opportunity to try to build family. And what this measure seeks to do is to take that away. Now, let's be clear, there are Republicans who actually very much support this, Republican voters who support IVF, that is. And what we see is part of an anti-abortion movement, one that supports replacement theory, this fear that somehow America will become more black and brown. And it's a sense of wielding power to create families in ways that are seemingly old fashioned, right? And that just is not consistent with where we are as a nation. It's really quite backwards what is being sought in Texas.
Well, so help me make sense of that. Because on the one hand, you have a segment of the conservative right that's very concerned with low fertility rates and the fact that we don't have enough babies, as Donald Trump put it. And there are, people on the left who share those concerns for other reasons, including the fact that there are a lot of women who want more children than they're able to have, as you note. What do you think this debate over access to fertility care really tells us about this conversation that's going on in the political right about who has access to the tools necessary to create a family or expand their family?
Well, if only there were a sensible conversation about it, because there are certainly questions to be asked with regard to IVF. It's very expensive. It actually has a very high failure rate. But there aren't questions being asked about access. How do low-income individuals who've experienced infertility gain access to these medical technologies that could hold the potential for them to become parents? But that's not what this is about. This is not an administration that has embraced medical information, but more medical disinformation and misinformation. It's not an administration that has embraced equity and equality. It's not done any of that. Instead, it's been a very rigid administration that pays very little attention to health, to science and technology. It moves more on kind of rhetoric and mythology than it does on science and care for the American public. I mean, let's be clear, we could have a very important conversation about these technologies, the ways in which they work and also the ways in which they don't work. But that's not what's being proposed in Texas. And that's not part of the discourse of this administration.
Michele Goodwin, thanks for your time tonight.
Thank you.
That is tonight's Last Word.